Hi Year 11. Once again, we are doing some exam practice and evidence building today. So last lesson you learnt about the knowledge, you learnt about urban regeneration on the Trent Basin. Today we're going to be using some of that information and we're going to be using some sources to write up an answer for a 6-mark question and 2 4-mark questions. You should be able to get your answers done during the lesson, and then I'm going to ask you to submit them to your teacher at the end, please. So that's our objectives today. Okay, study figure 1, an Ordnance Survey map extract showing part of the city of Glasgow. Now, that is quite blurry. I have actually found a better version, but I wanted to show you the version that you were given in the exam. It wouldn't be blurry in the exam, but I wanted you to see the actual copy. There are a few things that you can probably pick out instantly. The city centre, if I was to ask you for a grid reference of where the city centre is, you should acknowledge that it's around about 5865. We've got the motorway that kind of goes around it, so the city centre is within that area. And then we have got the River Clyde, which runs through the area as well, and you can even see a smaller stream joining that river from the north. And on the southern bank of the river, we've got a couple of docks that you can pick out as well. You might be seeing a similarity here with the Trent Basin in Nottingham. Okay, next part of the question. Oh, there's one other thing we can probably get before I do move on. We've got a scale line at the bottom, and you can see where it says 0 miles and then 1. That's probably the distance from Glasgow city centre, if not a little bit more, to the area of Govan, which is on the west of Glasgow. You can see that area Govan is in bold on the map. They've probably done that for a reason. So we're probably 1 to 2 miles away from Govan. Okay, moving on. Study figure 2, which describes part of the Central Govan Action Plan, a project to improve conditions in the Govan area of Glasgow. This area is shown on the Ordnance Survey map extract in figure 1. So we were just looking at that actually, that area of Govan. Let's have a look at the plan. The Central Govan Action Plan is part of the River Clyde Waterfront Urban Regeneration Project. Already you should be drawing similarities to the Trent Basin Urban Regeneration Project. That was also a waterfront one, wasn't it, on the River Trent? The Central Govan Action Plan will include the development of 2 new hospitals, which will serve the whole of Glasgow, 500 new homes and improvements to the run-down housing areas, restoration of historical buildings and the development of a riverside museum, improved shopping and recreational facilities, and the clearance of derelict industrial areas. The question is, using figure 2, so that's those bullet points there, and your own knowledge, so that will be the Trent Basin, explain how urban regeneration projects can reduce levels of urban deprivation. What I want you to do before you tackle this question is let's go back and look at Govan. So I've zoomed in now on that area and I've given you a better quality map. Before we address the question, we need to study this, and I want you to complete this task. Why do you think the area around Govan needs regenerating in the first place? So look for clues on the map here. I've got a little bit of a tip. Think back to last lesson when you looked at the Trent Basin in Nottingham. Are there any similarities? Pause this and then unpause to listen to my explanations. Okay, right. You may have noticed that we've got the waterfront there and we've got Prince's Docks. These docks will have existed when that river was in use a long time ago for bringing raw materials into the area and removing the finished products that would have been created in the industrial estate that you can see just below the word Govan to the left hand side, so southwest of that word Govan. It says industrial estate, and you can see all the railway lines, and even you can even see the warehouses. They are the big well, you've got the outlines of the big buildings with the beige coloured or orange coloured structures, they are all warehouses. Now we can assume that this area is no longer in use. It's probably a brownfield development now, because those buildings will have, they're not being used anymore, they've been abandoned, and they're probably attracting all sorts of crime. So why do we think this area needs regenerating? Well, it's quite close to the city centre, we know that, and we've got a large area here with probably very limited housing and a lot of disused buildings that are going to fall into disrepair. So we want to regenerate the area, we want to bring life back into it, we want to boost the economy, we want to create opportunities for people. There are a couple of schools, so we can see that there is obviously some housing in the area as well. We can assume that housing is the housing that needs to be improved. Okay, similarities to Trent Basin? Yes, there are. We had the dock area around Trent Basin, and we also had all the industrial warehouses and factories that were no longer in use, and the area had fallen into disrepair and there was a lot of crime. So there are similarities there. Okay, so what I want you to do is, going back to this figure 2, for each of these bullet points, I want you to write down in your book how each one reduces urban deprivation. And then I want you to brainstorm how the Trent Basin regeneration project has reduced urban deprivation too. You should spend a good 5 to 10 minutes doing that, please, as part of the planning for answering the question. Pause this now. 3, 2, 1. Okay. Each of these bullet points needs explaining. It's not good enough in the question to just write them out and say that's it leads to reducing urban deprivation and just copying it out, because you've not done anything with it. This first one here, I've linked to this bullet point. So we've got the development of 2 new hospitals which will serve the whole of Glasgow. Explaining that the new hospitals will improve access to healthcare, so it's going to improve people's social living, and it will create hundreds of jobs in the area, bringing in healthcare professionals. You think about our hospitals in Nottingham, they create thousands of jobs. Our University Hospitals Trust is actually the biggest employer in the whole of Nottingham. So having 2 new hospitals will create loads of jobs, boost the economy. It's going to bring professional people into the area, people that are highly skilled with high qualifications and high aspirations and lots of money. So that's great. The second bullet point, 500 new homes and improvement to rundown areas, links to this one here. Well, 500 new homes will have modern amenities because they're new builds and they're going to attract people into the area. And again, people bring life and they bring money. Third bullet point, restoring historical buildings improves the environment whilst maintaining the history and the identity of the area. So you're not losing the area's past. It's important to try and maintain those connections. So that's a social point. The next bullet point, improving the shopping and recreation facilities. Well, that will create shopping areas which will bring a variety of recreational opportunities to the people that live there, and it will improve the economy because people will be spending money, so it will lead to a multiplier effect. Also, it will create loads and loads of jobs in working in those shopping and recreational areas. And the final bullet point, the clearing of derelict industrial areas. Clearing derelict buildings will improve the reputation of the area and it will get rid of crime. It will change people's perception of what they feel and think about the area because you're modernising it and you're making it better. So I've not just copied those bullet points out, I have taken each one and I've said how it will improve the area, and that's what we mean by reducing deprivation. The second task I asked you to do was a brainstorm on the Trent Basin. This is down at the bottom here in blue. So these were some of the things that I have drawn out. 100 million was spent. They were making 350 new homes, offices, shops, waterside bars, public squares for people to spend their free time. They had River Trent walkways into town, so into the city centre. They had sustainable energy powering the homes, and a lot of the project was community driven. They were asking the residents their views So the Residents Association was established. Now, all of these are just parts of the project. How that reduces deprivation is in purple. So the whole fabric of the area has improved. In other words, they've built some beautiful looking properties. The houses have brought people into the area from different socio-economic backgrounds. Remember, last lesson we said that the houses were all different shapes and sizes. Some were affordable for people on lower incomes. Some were big family-sized homes for people on higher incomes. It has created, the building of all of these properties has created lots of jobs. It will have improved the economy, and the reputation around Trent Bridge, the reputation of the area has gone up as well. So these are all the positives. And now we need to think about answering the question. So here we go. Using figure 2 in your own knowledge, explain how urban regeneration projects reduce levels of urban deprivation. Just to remind you, this is what urban deprivation means. It means poor socio-economic and poor environmental conditions. So we are trying to reduce that. We're trying to make things better. So I've given you some sentence starters here. You have to start by using the figure. So go straight in with figure 2 says and use a quote from it. Make sure you explain how it reduces deprivation. That's the stuff in red. Then give another point. And if you've got time, the third point. If you haven't got time, I suggest you leave this final point off because that's just using the source. And then you need to go into using your own knowledge. So you studied the Trent Basin. State what the project involved. That's the stuff in blue. You don't need to give all of it, but some of it. And then explain how it reduced deprivation, which is the stuff in purple. Okay, and remember, you must link back to reducing deprivation, which is basically reducing things that give a poor environment, poor things for conditions for people, and a poor economy. We're trying to reduce that. Pause this slide. You need to spend 8 minutes on it now. Okay, the next question we're going to have a go at is this one here, a 4-marker. Study the figure below, a photograph showing a brownfield site in New Islington, Manchester. Just to remind you, brownfield means the land has been built on, it is no longer in use, it is abandoned. Now, obviously, these houses that you can see, I'm just going to circle them, these houses are not abandoned, they're obviously in use, and so will these tower blocks, these will be in use too. We are talking about the area here that's boarded up, so I'm just going to highlight it being green. All this area behind this boarding and this area behind this blue fencing is going to be the area that we are going to be looking to build on. Question is, describe disadvantages of building new housing on brownfield sites. You've got to use the picture and your own knowledge. It's worth 4. So using the picture will get you 2, and using your own knowledge will get you 2. Your task, you need to look back at last lesson's notes on the disadvantages of using brownfield sites, or you can use your revision guide. Do any of the disadvantages you've read fit this picture? Pause this, go and have a look, complete that task. Okay, you should have established that some of the disadvantages of building on brownfield sites are that you are restricted in terms of what you can build in terms of its size. This land has already been built on, so that road is already in place. We can't knock it down because it's an access route to places. The lampposts are already there. The drainage systems are already there. The electricity systems are already there. So we are restricted on what we can build and where we can build it. So that would be a disadvantage, and you can link that right into that photograph by saying that the photograph already has structures in place like roads, and therefore they have to build around them. So they can't just have their own nice plan of exactly what they want to build. They've got to build around those parameters. Other disadvantages that you might not get from the photo, they're going to have to clear the land, and that can be expensive. So that would be another disadvantage. Other disadvantages, if whatever used to be there contaminated the land, then they're going to have to decontaminate the land. Things like old petrol stations, they happen to contaminate the land quite badly because of petrol leaks and so on and so forth. And then you've got to clear the land. That can be quite expensive as well. Another disadvantage, perhaps wouldn't be much space for things like gardens if you're building houses here, because it's all very concrete, there's not much space. Other disadvantages, your views are going to be of those tower blocks in the photo, which you might not think are particularly attractive. Whereas obviously if you build on greenfield land, you get beautiful views of the countryside. So those are some of the disadvantages. I'd like you to have a go, please, at answering the question. I've put here a couple of sentence starters for you to use in those bullet points. You need to spend at least 5 minutes on this question. Make sure you've used the picture and you've explained your point, and make sure you've given another disadvantage from your own knowledge and explained your point. Go. And the final question that we're going to look at today. The following are strategies that planners use to make urban living more sustainable. Number 1, conserve the historic and natural environment. That means they're not removing it. Number 2, provide adequate open space. That's for people, like green space and parks. Number 3, include local people in the decision-making process. Choose 2 of the strategies and explain how each of your chosen strategies makes urban living more sustainable. Your task. How are these 3 strategies making living more sustainable? Pause this and have a think about it, please, before you start writing. Then I want you to unpause, listen to my explanations, and then you can have a go at answering the question. Okay, number 1, conserving the historic and natural environment. That is sustainable because you are preserving history and identity. It's a social point. It gives people a sense of place and a sense of identity, and that's important in keeping people in an area and keeping them happy. Conserving the natural environment is obviously sustainable because trees act as a carbon sink. They remove carbon out of the atmosphere, they produce oxygen, and they filter the air to make the air quality better. They also look nice as well, and that's another social point as well as an environmental one. Number 2, adequate open space. One of the things to make sustainable living is about people having variety to shops, services, and recreational areas. If you're providing adequate open space, it means that people have got somewhere to go and run around, they've got nature that they can enjoy, and that leads to better well-being and better health. So that's sustainable. And the third thing, including local people in the decision-making process, like they have with Trent Basin, is great because it means that people have their views heard and they're more likely to get things that are actually going to improve their lives, rather than somebody else making decisions on their behalf when they don't actually know what the people want and need. So including local people in the decision-making process is really powerful because it means that they feel that their voice is heard and they have a say. Okay, now you need to choose 2 of those, the 2 that you feel most comfortable in explaining. And then you need to use 2 of my bullet points on this slide, and you need to finish up your answers. You need to spend 5 minutes on this, so a couple of minutes on each, please. And then you are finished. You will need to submit your answers to your teacher. So do that now, please. And submit your 3 answers to your teacher, whichever way you want, so that they can build up an evidence base. And that's the end of today's lesson. Thank you very much for listening. Bye bye.